Childhood is supposed to be a time of security, a fortress built by the unwavering presence of your parents. My fortress, a sprawling old farmhouse on the outskirts of Bellingham, Washington, had a crack in its foundation from the very beginning. It wasn't a structural flaw you could point to, it was a feeling, a constant low-grade hum of wrongness that permeated the air, as tangible to me as the scent of pine and damp earth that clung to the property. The first time I saw one, I was 7. I had woken up thirsty, the digital clock on my nightstand casting a bloody 3:18 a.m. glow. My door was always left open a crack, a concession to a childhood fear of the dark that now seems bitterly ironic. In that crack of hallway darkness, a man was standing. He was taller than my father, a silhouette cut from a deeper black than the surrounding night. He had no face, no clothes, no details, just a solid, human-shaped void. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted, watching me. My breath froze in my lungs. My bladder felt dangerously warm. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just stared back, a silent, terrified prisoner in my own bed. After an eternity, I squeezed my eyes shut, counting to 10 with the frantic devotion of a prayer. When I opened them, the hallway was empty. I spent the rest of the night curled into a tight ball, the blankets pulled over my head, sweating and trembling. In the morning, I told myself it was a dream. But the sightings continued. They were always peripheral, always fleeting. A dark shape darting past the doorway to the living room. A tall, slender figure standing at the end of the hall, vanishing the moment you turned your head to look directly at it. I started calling them the Glimmers, a childish name for something that inspired a primal, adult terror. My parents noticed my change. I became jumpy, reluctant to go upstairs alone, my eyes constantly scanning the corners of rooms. My mother, let's call her Sarah, would find me asleep with the light on, my small body curled in a defensive knot. When she asked what was wrong, I'd mutter about bad dreams. I was afraid that saying the words out loud, "There's a tall black man who watches me at night," would make it more real, or worse, make my parents think I was crazy. The terror escalated the summer I turned 9. It started with the whispers, a low, staticky hiss, like a television tuned to a dead channel, that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, particularly in the upstairs hallway. It was a sound just below the threshold of hearing, a sibilant murmur that felt like insects crawling inside my skull. I'd press my ear to my bedroom door, my heart hammering, trying to decipher if it was just the old house settling or something more. But this sound had a rhythm, a cadence that mimicked speech. It was the sound of the silence here, and it was getting louder. One night the fear became a shared experience. I was lying in bed, paralyzed by that familiar gut-churning dread, convinced a glimmer was just outside my door. Then I heard my parents' bedroom door creak open down the hall. I heard my father's, let's call him David, heavy footsteps. He stopped right outside my room. I held my breath, waiting for him to check on me. Instead, I heard his voice, low and tense. "Sarah, come here." A moment later, my mother's lighter footsteps joined his. I crept out of bed, pressing my eye to the crack in my door. They were standing at the end of the hall, silhouetted by the nightlight in the bathroom. They were both staring into my little sister's room. My father's posture was rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "Did you see it?" my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "A shadow," my father replied, his voice a low gravel, right over her crib, just for a second. A cold certainty washed over me. It wasn't just me. They saw them too. The knowledge was both a relief and a horrifying confirmation. Our house was sick. The following weeks were a silent, shared descent into tension. The unspoken rule was broken. We all knew, but no one spoke of it directly. The atmosphere in the house became thick and heavy. My father, a pragmatic engineer, started checking the locks on the windows 3 times each night. My mother began burning sage she bought from a local shop, the pungent smoke doing little to mask the underlying chill that had taken up residence in the home. We started spending more time in the living room together, a tight, fearful cluster on the sofa, the television volume turned up too high to drown out the whispering walls. The breaking point came on a stormy night in October. The wind howled around the house, rattling the windows in their frames. The power flickered, died, and plunged us into an oppressive darkness, lit only by the frantic flashes of lightning. My father lit a few kerosene lamps, casting long, dancing shadows that made my heart race. Every creak of the old house, every groan of the wind, was a footstep, a breath. We were all huddled in the living room, wrapped in blankets, when we heard it. From the top of the stairs, a distinct, heavy thud, then another. It was the sound of a footfall on the top step. My mother gasped, clutching my sister to her chest. My father stood up, his face a mask of grim determination in the lamplight. He picked up the heavy metal poker from the fireplace. The footsteps began to descend the stairs. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Creak, thud, creak, thud. They were coming down. The static whisper in the walls surged into a chaotic, angry buzz that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. The temperature in the room plummeted. Our breath plumed in the lamplight. My father stood at the base of the stairs, the poker held in a white-knuckled grip, facing the darkness of the stairwell. I could see the fear in the set of his shoulders, but also a raw, protective fury. He was prepared to fight a shadow to protect his family. The footsteps reached the bottom step. They stopped. The buzzing static reached a deafening crescendo, a physical pressure in my ears. In the archway that led from the front hall to the living room, the tall glimmer appeared. It was more solid than I had ever seen it, a 3-dimensional blot of nothingness that seemed to drink the light from the lamps. It stood there, facing my father, its featureless head tilted. My father didn't swing the poker. He didn't yell. He just stood his ground, a solid, breathing man facing a void. The standoff felt like it lasted for hours, the storm raging outside, the static screaming inside. I watched my father, my hero, ready to battle a nightmare made real. And then, something in my father's posture changed. The aggressive stance softened slightly. The fury in his eyes was replaced by a deep, profound sadness. He slowly lowered the poker, the metal tip clicking softly against the hardwood floor. He took a single step forward. "This is our home," he said, his voice quiet but firm, devoid of the anger I expected. It was a statement, simple and final. "You do not get to have this space. You do not get to have my family." He didn't say it to us. He said it to the thing in the archway. A profound silence fell. The static whisper cut out instantly, as if a switch had been thrown. The oppressive pressure vanished. The glimmer didn't fade or retreat. It simply ceased to be there. One moment it was a terrifying fact in our living room. The next, it was just an empty archway. The storm outside seemed to lessen in its fury. The kerosene lamps burned steadily, their light now feeling warm and comforting instead of weak and fearful. The deep, penetrating cold began to recede, replaced by the normal chill of a powerless house on an autumn night. My father turned and looked at us. His face was pale, but calm. He walked back to the sofa, placed the poker carefully on the hearth, and sat down. He put his arm around my mother, who was crying silent tears of relief, and pulled me and my sister into a tight, family embrace. We sat like that for a long time, listening to the wind die down and the rain soften to a gentle patter on the roof. The glimmers never returned. The static whispers never came back. The cold spot in the upstairs hallway was just a draft again. My father never spoke of that night, and we never felt the need to ask him about it. The action had been the language, and the resolution had been the truth. We had taken our home back, not with violence or rituals or fear, but with a simple, courageous declaration of ownership. The crack in my childhood fortress had been sealed not by ignoring the darkness, but by my father standing before it and speaking a single, undeniable truth into its face. We belonged here. It did not. And in that quiet, powerful understanding, we found a peace that was deeper and more secure than any we had known before. The house was just a house again, its sounds, merely the sound of settling.